Hello to anyone who is listening, and welcome to a review of, firstly, the first movie that I ever thought was actually scary, and what I consider to be the scariest movie that I have seen to this date. I really like horror as a concept. I think fear is a very interesting emotion in humans, especially the fact that you can feel scared in your own house or in your own room, even in the middle of broad daylight, playing horror games or watching horror movies. I think that entire concept is very cool. So I just wanted to make a video about it. So, spoiler warning for both the movies I'm going to talk about, which is I Am Legend and Sinister. Huge spoiler warning. I'm not going to go super in depth on the story and reveal everything, but I am going to say things that will reveal what happens in the movies and might reveal a little bit of the end, but I'll try and keep it vague enough that if you haven't seen them and still want to watch the video, you should be able to watch it without getting too much of a spoiler. I Am Legend is about a solo survivor in an apocalyptic New York. Robert Neville, played by Will Smith, is the last man in New York after a human-made plague has transformed everyone else into mutants. I Am Legend is the first movie that ever really scared me, and I'll explain why in a bit, but I was also like 10 years old when I saw it for the first time, so that probably has something to do with it, but I still wanted to talk about it because it was the first movie that really showed me what horror is. And it is all about one man and his dog against thousands of mutant humanoid creatures. As someone with immune blood, he stays in New York in order to search for a cure, eventually running into a woman and her kid, which reminds him of his wife and kid who died at the beginning of the outbreak. As an adult and looking back on the movie, it really was not as scary as I thought. It is more of a thriller than a horror, but it was the first film that ever gave me nightmares and made me scared to fall asleep. I think the reason the movie is so scary to me is the idea of the isolation and mind-numbing solitary you would face being alone for years. There are many points throughout the movie where you see Will Smith talk to mannequins he has set up and has given names to them too. He also has memorized what I assume to be the entirety of the Shrek movie in a scene where a kid is watching it and he comes out and quotes every single line that Shrek and Donkey are saying, which on its own sounds like its own torture. Being alone is a fear that I think most people can relate to, but having an entire city to yourself, searching for people every day, but knowing you can't leave because you may be the cure is soul crushing. To the point when he does see people again, he is anxious. Along with the isolation being a reason I was so scared, I was also 10, as I said, and the enemies were very scary, and still are, but in a different way. As a kid, they were these fast zombie vampire things that can't stay in sunlight. They have pale, lumpy, scarred skin, and the CGI from 2007 helped make this look even better because it looked worse. They were just a spooky looking monster, and as a kid I thought that that was scary, and as an adult, the looks don't scare me as much as the brain does. See, as an adult, I fear how smart these things were. There is one scene where Will Smith is driving and spots one of these mannequins in a place he did not leave it, and he goes to investigate, screaming the mannequin's name as he approaches, showing how delusional he is and how scary he is at this realization that one of the mannequins might have moved on its own. It is truly one of the most heartbreaking and scary scenes in the movie because you just see this man be broken by the fact that there's a piece of plastic in a road, which sounds weird out of context, but it really is just a very sad scene watching him completely break down over this. But he shoots it and then looks around as if realizing he was being watched, shooting wildly all above him. Finally approaching the downed mannequin, he falls into a trap, which suspends him in air dangling above the road. And this is some of the first signs that these things aren't just animals, but can think. And in an alternate ending of the movie, it shows just how intelligent they are. This whole time, the reasons the mutants have been coming after him is because one of the mutants he kidnapped had been the partner to the leader of the mutants, showing they have leaders and lovers, which feels like a pretty advanced thing for something you would assume are mindless monsters. This revelation was scary to me as an adult because it raises so many questions, like, are they still their original selves, or are they peaceful until provoked? It is scary to discover because the idea of another sentient life with our level of thinking becoming stronger than us is one of the scariest things that could happen to the human race. Overall, I think the movie is a bit meh. It's got some cool action and is very well acted by Will Smith, who is basically the only actor on screen for like 80% of the movie. But it relies on some classic, apocalyptic zombie movie tropes. And the CGI, although making the monsters look a little cool, also really dates the movie and makes them look, like 2007 CGI. It really pulls you out of the experience. But I think it's a fun, somewhat unique apocalyptic movie that is worth your time. Alright, now for what I think is the scariest movie that I have seen so far in my life, we have Sinister. And Sinister is what I think a really good horror movie is in a sea of trash that plagues the horror genre. And I wanted to explain why I think it's so good. Sinister follows a true crime writer named Ellison Oswald, played by Ethan Hawke. He's in a creative slump and hasn't had a good book in over 10 years, so to solve this slump, he moves his whole family to the scene of a family homicide where everyone but the daughter was found dead and the daughter missing. As the family begins to settle in, many signs point toward a supernatural element, leading Ethan's character to fall down a rabbit hole leading towards hell. Firstly, I love the cliche with unique twist that this movie does. I think it is very cleverly written. The new family moves into a haunted house is a pretty rundown idea, but using the main character to be a writer looking for a new book helps ease this cliche in by making it make sense why he chose a house with this kind of history and putting his family in this situation. And in every one of these movies, we all just think, well, why don't they just, pack up and move away and be away from whatever is haunting them? And spinning that cliche on its head is such a creative move to sideswipe your viewers, pulling away that safe feeling you get when they are away from the house. I think the creative spin and twist this movie did to its cliches really helped make it feel like something actually more than just a generic, haunting movie, and made it stand above the rest. Now, what actually makes this movie scary is a question you might be asking. Well, there are a lot of things. The antagonist of the film is never a threat directly to the family. He never, slowly walks towards them with a big machete or comes to attack them, but uses psychological warfare to slowly break down the family. And as the writer/father digs deeper into the mystery, more things begin to happen, like their son having a manic episode in the middle of the night, or their daughter drawing on the walls and talking about her new imaginary friend who has the same name as the missing daughter. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, though. Every member of the family has these weird going-ons that are creepy on their own, but then there's what I think is the scariest part of this movie and one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. The home videos. These are recordings of other families being murdered in increasingly gruesome ways, all shot from a film reel home video set. The grainy footage mixed with the terrifying visuals and fantastical foreboding soundtrack makes each home video very tense, always waiting for what's going to pop out next until it does. Another scene that has always stayed in the back of my mind is the scene of the father being stalked. I want you to take a minute and just imagine this in your head. You hear a noise in the middle of the night. You have 2 kids, but things have been strange lately, so you go to investigate. You walk through your house, slowly checking each room, hearing creaking right behind you every so often. The feeling of someone right next to you always present, until you finally hear a thud from the attic. So you head up and look into the attic through a hatch, and there you see it. A circle of dead kids staring you in your face, placing one finger over their lips, signifying you to be quiet, as they sit and watch the home movies of families being murdered. What an absolutely chilling idea. This movie is very cleverly written, and has many scares that aren't just, boo, something popped out at you. This movie builds tension like no other, and will always have you guessing what will happen next, and what kind of horror you'll see. Overall, I recommend this movie to any person who likes horror, and would like to see what I consider to be one of the peak horror movies in our time. Now, overall, I just wanted to talk about the idea of horror real quick at the end. I think most horror movies are pretty bad. I'm not very scared by them. There's something about just watching a movie that doesn't scare me much. I think I know there's like 3 horror movies that have ever actually really scared me and made me uncomfortable. So the idea of horror movies has never really been one I liked, but I really do love the concept of horror, so I try to pay attention to them. Now, horror games, I am terrified of. I am so bad at playing horror games, it's insane. I get scared at the slightest idea that something might pop out at me, and I think it's because I'm in control at those points that really like scare me. Because if something happens, then it's my fault. Where if it's in a movie, I can be like, "Oh, what dumbass! Yeah, you shouldn't have walked into the dark room with blood dripping from the ceiling, you fucking idiot." But when it's a game, it's me who's in control, and then I'm the idiot that gets killed. So I would like to cover more horror stuff in the future because I do really, really love horror. And I might do some kind of reaction type video to some YouTube shorts that I think are scary, and things like that, like homemade horror videos. So something like that might be fun to do one day. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you later.